Well, thank you very much, Jesse, and thank you for all of you for joining us for today's webinar. As you heard, my name is Mike Mowdy. I am the managing partner for Execulytics, a consulting company for the produce industry. Also the author of the Produce Almanac, the most comprehensive, objective review of the produce markets available. And today we're going to talk about Christmas. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how the Christmas timeframe is important for the produce industry. And we're going to start off by introducing this infographic. This infographic will give us all of the important metrics that we'll use to gauge the importance, first of all, of the week of Christmas, but also important products for the Christmas time period. And the first thing we'll do is we're going to look at the thermometer on the left-hand side of the screen and see how many produce shipments as relative to the entire year's produce shipments occur on the Christmas bye week. And for us, we're talking about week 50 as the Christmas bye week. So the higher the mercury goes on this thermometer will tell us how important Christmas is for produce. So it stops at about 1.8%. So let's pause there for a second. There are 52 weeks in a year, which means that an average week is about 2% of produce shipments. And here we see that Christmas is about 1.8% of produce shipments. So it's actually a little bit below average. So why are we talking about Christmas? Well, for a couple of reasons. For one, Christmas being so close to the end of the year, it gives us that one last chance to make our seasonal year-end metrics. But also, Christmas is important, but it's also concentrated into one or two really big days. Now, I lived a lot of Christmas times over my years, and every year I would be totally surprised at just how big that big Christmas day is. Even though I've lived it many years before, it still surprised me. So if you can win that big day, you can win that big week, and then possibly even make your year-end numbers. I always used to tell people that worked in my organization that you're never too far off from making your numbers or missing your numbers. And it's the little things that can really mean the difference between making them and not making them. And Christmas is one of those little things, as it turns out it's a big thing, that can help you get over the hump. So let's look at something a little bit more concrete. Let's take a look at total truckloads. We see that it takes 26,179 truckloads to satisfy the demand for the Christmas time period. But I'll also tell you that that's a little bit understated. That number that comes from the USDA doesn't include some of the big break bulk type shipments that come from offshore. And we're going to talk about one of those big programs in a minute. And we're also going to look at inflation and deflation over the important Christmas week. First, we'll look at the Christmas buy and see what sort of cost inflation there was. And then we'll look at the Christmas week to see what sort of retail inflation there was. So we see that last year over the Christmas buy week, costs inflated about 8.2%, and retail prices went in lockstep with that, increased at about 7.8%. So that's information that's good to know as we take a look at different costs throughout the time period. And so for the balance of this webinar, we're going to look at some of the important items that make Christmas. Some of these items will be very familiar to you, things like clementines and cauliflower. And some of them you might think, I wonder why they're on this webinar, things like leaf lettuce and bunch spinach. So we'll get into some of those as we get through it. And so the first item we'll talk about are clementines. So we're going to set up the same infographic that we saw for the Christmas week for each one of these items. And when you think about clementines, we would probably take a look at this analysis, say 20 years ago, and it would be even more important than it is today. But today we see clementines in our stores almost 52 weeks out of the year. So whereas 20 years ago, as soon as the first snowfall came, we would be anxious to run out to the grocery store to get our first taste of clementines. And certainly on our Christmas fruit platter, we would be looking forward to our first taste of clementines. But these days, they're really available year-round. So it's not quite as important over the Christmas time period as it used to be, but you'll see as this mercury rises on our thermometer that it is still a very important product during the Christmas bye week. We see 6.2% of all clementines are sold on that Christmas bye week. And remember I said that some of the truckloads are a little bit understated because of the big break bulk offshore shipments? Well, this is one that really demonstrates that. And I had to go through a variety of different sources to try and estimate the number of truckloads that this program means for the Christmas bye week. And I've estimated that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,000. So that's a lot of truckloads to satisfy the demand for clementines across North America. And if we take a look at what happened last year for costs, we see a pretty big uptick of about 19%, with retail prices declining about 6.5%. Now, this tells me that retailers were using a seasonal favorite like clementines as a loss leader to drag customers into their stores so that hopefully they'll buy other things while they're there. So now let's take a look at the 10-year cost history of clementines. So this will be a snapshot in time, a 7-week period between weeks 46 and 52 over the last 10 years. And so we're going to draw a quick line graph to show the average weekly costs for each one of those weeks. And so we see some typical seasonal ups and some seasonal downs. And if I look closely, I think I see a little bit of a downward trend in costs. Some of the peaks in the later years are lower than the peaks in the earlier years, and same thing with the low costs. So if we were to draw a line through the center of this graph to indicate the general direction of the data, we can get an indication of inflation or deflation over this time period. And we see that this product was deflating annually at about a 2.5% clip. Now, one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about deflation, generally speaking, we operate in an inflationary economy. And over the last 10 years, although we haven't had a massive amount of inflation, around 1 or 2% a year, when we're talking about a product that's deflating in an inflating economy, it makes it a little bit more important or a little more impactful than that 2.5% number suggests. So now we can take this data and actually predict where we're going to be for the Christmas time period in 2019. But I want to give you a bit of a word of caution. This is a fantastic way to generate predictions for costs in produce because, as we know, we live in a very cyclical industry, and oftentimes history does repeat itself. But there are times where significant events happen that will cause either dramatic drops in supply or dramatic drops or increases in supply or significant changes in demand. An example would be what we saw in the springtime for celery. We never could have predicted that celery juicing would become the biggest thing in our industry, but it did, and it created quite a spike in demand. And so product that we're normally seeing for $10 or $15 FOB, suddenly we were seeing $50, $60, $70 FOB. That's the type of thing that this analysis wouldn't capture. But other than that, it's actually pretty good. But I do want to give you that little bit of caution so you're aware that when you're making your plans, you're using this plus any other pieces of information that you have at your disposal. So enough said with that. Let's take a look at where we are for 2019 5-pound clementine costs. We see the cost starts around week 46, just a shade under $4, and then declines throughout the time period. And if we take a look at the important week, the Christmas bye week, week 50, we see that we have a cost of about $3.28 FOB. So now you can use that information to start to plan your retails or possibly even your ads as we get closer to the Christmas timeframe. So here's another infographic that we'll see throughout the webinar. This is an alert telling us about an important part of the time period that we should keep in mind as we're executing throughout the season. And the first thing we're going to talk about is, although we were discussing an important seasonal event, Christmas isn't the only seasonal event at this time. Hanukkah is celebrated between December 22nd and December 30th. And it's an important holiday for us to remember because the population in our countries that celebrate this this celebration is quite impactful. For example, in the United States, there are 5.7 million Jewish people. That represents about 17 out of every 1,000 people, and it makes it the #2 population outside of Israel. And in Canada, there are 390,000 Jewish people, making it the 4th largest Jewish population in the world. And approximately 10 out of every 1,000 people are Jewish. And these are going to mean an importance in our stores for this type of an event. So how can we be prepared to celebrate this event and make sure that our customers are prepared to shop our stores? Well, the best thing we can do is focus on the important products that make up the Hanukkah celebration. And one of the most important products are potatoes. Another important product are pomegranates. And then dates are also make up an important part of a Hanukkah celebration. And if you want to generate some incremental sales throughout the entire store, it's not a bad idea to cross-merchandise honey. And if we focus on these items, we could inform our customers of the importance that we place on this celebration, but not just managing these items, but also letting our customers know that the reason we're focusing on these items is because we're focusing on Hanukkah. Let our customers know that we are in this game and that we're interested in satisfying their needs. The next item we're going to talk about is leaf lettuce. Of course, leaf lettuce is one of the secondary lettuce type items, so it might be a little bit surprising to see it on this list. But if we look at how important the Christmas time period is for leaf lettuce, we see that the mercury rises all the way to 3.2%. So that's a fairly significant jump for an item that is considered a secondary type item. And even still, 236 truckloads are required to deliver on the demand for leaf lettuce. So now if we take a look at what happened last year, we see inflation of 412%. Now, for those of you who are used to buying leafy greens, you might think, well, yeah, that's par for the course. One year it's $10 and the next year it's 40. I live that all the time. But if you're not so used to buying leafy greens, this might come as a bit of a surprise to see 400% inflation. And the question that of course comes is, what does that mean to the retail price? Well, the truth of the matter is we don't really know, because according to the USDA, 95% of the stores pulled leaf lettuce or at least did not register a price for leaf lettuce during the Christmas timeframe. So that tells me that they most likely pulled leaf lettuce off of their shelves and focused on different types of lettuces. Now, the 5% that did register a price on leaf lettuce, they had very regular prices like $1.29 or 99 cents or something like that. And that tells me that they probably had some carryover leaf lettuce, or perhaps some leaf lettuce that was starting to turn, so they had to discount it to a lower price. So if we take a look at where we've been over the last 10 years, we'll see something quite interesting. We see actually a very flat line, and then two big spikes, one about 4 years ago, and then the one last year that drove that 400% inflation. And so if we were to take our trend line through this data, we would see that we do have a fair clip of inflation, about 5.5% inflation. And a lot of that would be driven by those two big spikes, particularly last year's spike. And so we should question now, what does that mean for next year? Are we going to retreat back to where we've been, more around that $10 range, or will we be seeing some significant costs like in the $40 and $50 range like last year? Or will there be some sort of lasting effect, but not quite as large as what we saw last year? Well, time will tell, but our analysis says that we will see some kind of a lasting effect, but not the full effect. And you'll see our cost curve over the 7 weeks of Christmas for 2019. We see a bit of a rising cost, and then after the Christmas time period, that cost comes down. And when we speak specifically of week 50, the bye week, we see a cost of $19.05 FOB. So the next alert we're going to look at is we're going to talk about our organic program and how we can drive our organic program with the lettuce, namely romaine hearts. And one of the reasons romaine hearts is a good product to showcase your organic program is because of the stability of costing for organic romaine hearts. The first thing we're going to look at is the cost line for conventional romaine hearts between 2016 and 2018 for each of the weeks that we're concerned with. And we see initial stability and then a big spike up for the Christmas time period. Now, if we were to overlay the organic cost line over this, we see something a little bit different. We see something that is a little bit more stable, and we actually see a decline when the conventional increased. So this cost stability really allows us to drive this program at retail and provide a good offer for our customers. So let's talk a little bit more about that, how we can capitalize on this organic romaine heart opportunity. Well, the first thing that we should do for sure is make sure that all of our stores are carrying organic romaine hearts. It's not a slam dunk that they all will be, so it's a good idea just to make sure that we are, because we can't drive this category, of course, unless we are selling organic romaine hearts. And when it comes to pricing, setting a retail price that reflects the cost premium is very important. And we should think about it in terms of two different guardrails. A high guardrail would be more general and say that we shouldn't price our organic product so high that it becomes a detriment for our customers and it scares them away from the category. But on the other hand, the low guardrail, we should remember that this is a premium item, and we're trying to upsell our customers from their item of choice to the premium organic product. So we don't want to trade our customers up to a product that is less profitable for us. So that would be our low guardrail. And a good gauge on where that price should be is always going to be our cost. Certainly over the Christmas holiday, we're going to be looking to advertise a lot of these Christmas type items, including romaine hearts. Well, this is a great opportunity to advertise your organic romaine hearts in the same ad that you advertise your conventional. It could be a full picture, or even if it was just a line mention that says, we have organic romaine hearts available, and you can get them at our store. And then lastly, you'll want to place them in a spot where your customers will find them. That could be nearby the conventional romaine hearts so that they have an opportunity to compare, or it could be somewhere else in the store, but in an equally large spot so that your customers can find it and know that you have that product. So the next product we'll look at are seedless grapes. Seedless grapes are actually very important in the summer and in the fall, but they maintain their importance right through the Christmas time period. And we actually see that we sell a lot of grapes over Christmas. And if we take a look at how high we go on our thermometer, we see that although not as high as some of the other products we've seen, it stops at 2.4%. So it punches above its weight class for the Christmas time period. And it being such an important item across the year, it takes an awful lot of volume to satisfy the demand. And so we're talking about 1,085 trucks to satisfy the massive demand for grapes over the Christmas timeframe. And so what we saw last year was a pretty good decline in our costs, about a 35% cost deflation, and then another good decline in our retail prices. So about a 20% decline in retail prices. So that tells me that collectively, retailers were giving a little bit back to their customers in terms of lower prices, but also taking a little bit of a greater profit as the costs declined greater than the retail price. So not a bad strategy for retailers. And so if we were to take a look at our costs over the last 10 years, we see some pretty significant ups and some pretty significant downs. And you'll see that last year where the costs didn't spike up quite as much. That's that big deflationary year that we saw last year. And it looks to me similar to the Clementines that we have a little bit of a downward trend on costs. And so if we were to draw our trend line, we in fact do see that we are deflating about 2.25% annually on grapes. And remember what I said about the economy as a whole inflating at about 1 or 2% a year. So that's added on to this deflationary pressure on grapes. So it's a little bit more impactful than that 2.25% suggests. And so if we were to take a look at our trends for 2019, we see that we start the period off right around $18, a little bit below $18, and then the cost increases as that Christmas demand really takes hold. And if we take a look at the important week 50, we're predicting a cost of $23.54. So we talked about some important multicultural events, but it's good to remember that there are also a lot of multicultural items that make up these events. And if we want to be successful during any time period, including the Christmas time period, we should keep in mind the importance of these multicultural items. And the one that I'd like to focus on are some prominent Asian products. The first thing we'll look at is the total annual truckloads required to satisfy the demand for Napa, bok choy, and pomelo in 2017. And you'll see Napa was right around about 1,000 truckloads, bok choy right around 500 truckloads, and pomelo about 300 truckloads. So now if we take a look at where we were in 2018, we see something interesting. We see Napa going all the way up to about 1,500 truckloads, which represents about a 50% increase year over year. That's a pretty significant increase. Bok choy, around 700 truckloads, we see about a 40% increase. And pomelo, just nip and tuck to about 500 truckloads, so about a 60% increase. That's some pretty significant increases year over year. We don't have the numbers yet for the full year for 2019, but my bet is it's probably going to grow again. And then what does that mean for 2020? Again, I would suggest that this is a growth category, and we're going to continue to see growth in 2020. So how do we jump on this opportunity and use it to our advantage? Well, there's a lot of things we can do. I would say in order to sell to some new customers who are just getting into the category, as well as existing customers who are very familiar with this category, the one thing we can do is expand our assortments. Now that, of course, depends on what our current assortment is today. If our assortment is focusing mostly on things like bok choy and Napa, now might be a really good time to increase it to things like Shanghai bok choy or Gailon or other Asian vegetables that would be considered secondary to some of the big ones. And that might introduce new customers into the category, but it'll also let your existing customers know that you're no longer just on the sidelines here. You really want to get involved in this category in a big way. What's very important about this category, though, is it's very price sensitive. And so I would recommend that you have your staff actually get out into the marketplace and see what your competition is doing on this product. If you're out of line on price, your customers will leave you very quickly on this product. So you want to make sure that you're in the general marketplace for this category. And if you have an advanced sampling program, this is a great category to try some different recipes with. Again, not only will you be introducing some new exotic flavors to some new customers that might very well become big customers for this product, you're also letting your existing customers know that you know this category, you know how to use this category, and you're going to be there for the long haul for your customers to choose your store as their primary place to buy these types of products. And don't be afraid to use your signage package to communicate to your customer. Of course, you're going to let them know the price and the product, but this is some good real estate to give a little bit more information about the product, where it's from, some of the history, some of the basic recipes that you can use it for, and maybe a little bit like what it's similar to in the produce department. And there's going to be times throughout the year where these types of products really take center stage. And I'm talking about things like Chinese New Year, which is hot off the heels of Christmas, or the Mid-Autumn Festival, which we just finished, or dragon boat festivals throughout the year. And so these times of years, people are really going to be looking to entertain with this type of product. So it's a good time to open up on your displays, build some off-shelf displays, maybe some end caps on this product. And again, to showcase to your customers that you're in this game and you're serious about it. The next product we'll talk about is bunch spinach. This is one of those ones that might surprise you that it's on this list. It's really a secondary or tertiary type of item, and to really generate a lot of excitement is rare. But for Christmas, it really does punch above its weight class. I would, if we look at the mercury rising, we see that it lands at 3.8%. So 3.8% of all spinach shipments occur on the Christmas bye week. And remember, Christmas as a whole represents 1.8% of all produce shipments. So this is more than double the importance of the Christmas time. And so again, this is a secondary or tertiary type item, but it still requires 161 truckloads to satisfy the demand. Now, when it comes to our inflation or deflation ticker, we saw some pretty dramatic things with another leafy green, the leaf lettuce. Let's see what happens with this one. We see some inflation, pretty big inflation, but not quite as big as what we saw with the leaf lettuce. And we see retail price inflation that pretty much moves in lockstep with the cost. So unlike the leaf lettuce, we still see stores carrying bunch spinach, but inflating the price to match the cost. And if we take a look at our 10-year cost history, we see something that looks relatively similar to what we saw with leaf lettuce. You know, some flat costs at the beginning, a spike about 4 years ago, and then the big spike last year. And again, similar to what we saw with leaf lettuce, we see some inflation, about 4.75% inflation, a little bit driven by the big spike last year. And if we take a look at where we are for 2019 for 24 count bunch spinach, again, we see a cost prediction line that is reminiscent of the leaf lettuce line. We see it moving up at the beginning of the time period and then coming down as the Christmas demand wanes a little bit. And so if we look specifically at the week 50 time frame, we see our prediction is $17.52. And as I've mentioned before, this is a great opportunity to start to think about your retail pricing for the time period, and maybe even start to think about where your ads are going to land. So Christmas can be a very confusing time frame. It's a very busy time in the stores, but then add into it some of the days off and some of the changes to the warehouses or suppliers, and it can really make for a very confusing time. If we look at some of the things that could happen to your produce order specifically, you might be looking at days where you have to place a double order, days where you have to place an early order. Of course, there's days where there will be no order, no delivery, and then alternative delivery schedules will also come into play during this time. And again, it's a very busy time, and to add this added confusion can be sometimes very frustrating. So it's certainly never too early to plan ahead for these types of events. And let's talk about some of the things that we can do to make sure we're on top of these changes. So for one, you will likely get a hard copy of the order schedule. It's a good idea to post that somewhere in the back room so that all your staff can see it, whether it's on a bulletin board or on the wall or even on the door to the cooler, somewhere where everyone can see it. Now, you're going to have people normally who do some of these very important tasks like ordering product or receiving product, and oftentimes there'll be full-time staff who have a set schedule. And if the revised order and receiving schedule changes so that these people are not available when these important tasks need to be fulfilled, you could find yourself in a bit of a pickle. So you should schedule your labor accordingly, and that either means that the people who are accustomed to doing this or who are trained to do these important tasks will need to be scheduled at the time those tasks are required to be done. Or a second option is to make sure you have other people who are trained to do order taking or placing orders or receiving orders. And so it's important to make sure that the right people are available when these important things happen. I also suggest that you meet with your staff. It's probably a good idea as soon as the revised schedule comes out to schedule a very brief staff meeting with the entire group and just let them know how important Christmas is, how important the sales are, and the alternate order schedules, and just make sure everybody is aware of what's happening over the next week or 2 weeks. And as I mentioned before, consult with that order plan every single day. Like I said, it's going to be posted somewhere across the department. So make sure every single day you're looking at it. And then lastly, it's a good idea to make notes for next year. And hopefully you've made notes from last year for this year. As I had mentioned previously, of all the Christmases I worked, it still surprised me when certain things happened, whether it was big demand or changes to certain processes. And it's a good idea to just remind yourself that maybe you missed this this year, and so you won't miss it next year if you find a note for that. So here's a product that I'm sure will not surprise you that it's on this list: cauliflower. Of course, cauliflower is a favorite for 52 weeks of the year, but it does drive a more importance over the Christmas time period. And let's just see exactly how important that is as we see the mercury rising on the thermometer. Goes all the way to 3.8%. Again, this is a very staple item and available 52 weeks out of the year, but it drives a significant amount of importance over the Christmas time frame. And it takes 400 truckloads to satisfy the demand. So that's a pretty big mover. Last year, we saw some deflation, about 6%, and some retail price deflation, pretty much in lockstep with the costing. So pretty much mirroring the declines. And so if we take a look at our 10-year cost history for cauliflower, we see some fairly significant ups and downs. We see costs that bottom out below $10, and we also see costs that go as high as almost $50. So a very volatile category that has seen some inflation over the last 10 years, about 4.25%. So we take a look at this, we think, where are we going to be for 2019? And we see a cost line that is really not for the faint of heart. This is a very important category with a lot of demand, and we see the costing rises to meet that demand. And if we take a look at week 50, we see a cost of $27.11. Certainly not a low-cost product, of course, driven by an enormous amount of demand who want to see cauliflower on their Christmas dinner table. So let's take a look at organics again and take a look at a different item that we can showcase our organic program with. And we're going to look at broccoli. Now, unlike the romaine hearts, the costing isn't as stable, but what's stable are the premiums relative to conventional. So if we take a look at our conventional cost line, we see it's hovering right around that $11 to $14 range. And if we were to overlay our organic cost line, we see that there is some variability, but what's not so variable is the premiums. So it allows us to do some big things in store with this product. So let's think about some of the ways that we can drive our organic category with organic broccoli. And just like we heard with the romaine hearts, the number one important step is make sure we're carrying organic broccoli. In order to showcase this product for the category, we have to make sure it's in our stores. We also heard about setting a price that reflects the cost premium. This is perhaps even more important with broccoli because the premium is so stable. So it allows us to set a premium like 50 cents or maybe $1 a head and stick with that premium. But remember our guardrails. We want to make sure we don't price it out of the market so as to scare our customers away, but it's also a premium product, and so we don't want to trade our customers up to a premium product that is less profitable for the organization. Again, we're going to be advertising a lot during the Christmas time period and probably advertising a big Christmas item like broccoli. So it's a good idea to include broccoli in your organic broccoli in your ads. Again, maybe it's a picture, maybe it's a line mention, but you want to tell your customers that you're in the organic game and you're not just offering it as a flavor item. It's an important category for you. And again, you want to showcase it, so make sure it's in a display that your customers can find. It can be near the broccoli, the conventional broccoli, or it can be separate from the conventional broccoli. But if you want to showcase your category with it, make sure that it's big and bold. And lastly, this is a great product to sample for your customers. It's easy. You can sample it alongside of a new dip. But you can tell your customers that this is the same product. The only difference is it's got a little bit of a benefit because it's organic. So the last product we'll look at is a bit of a specialty item, Kiwifruit. It's one of those favorite items to find on fruit trays anytime, but typically during the Christmas time frame, it's a great time to showcase this item for your company on fruit trays, and so the demand is quite big, and we see that over the Christmas buy week, 3.1% of all kiwi is sold during that week. So pretty impactful. Although it is a very specialized item, so it only takes about 40 truckloads to satisfy the demand. And what we saw last year was some cost deflation, about 18.5%, and retail price inflation of about 18.5%. That sounds a little bit funny to me. It would suggest that retailers were really harvesting their profit on kiwi, but I would say take that with a bit of a grain of salt, because it probably means that retailers, in the face of lower costs, were sizing up. So they are offering their customers a larger size kiwi, which of course would carry a larger retail price, but they weren't necessarily driving inflation on that category. And so looking at our costs over the last 10 years, we see something that's fairly stable, and then a bit of a spike towards the end. And we do see some inflation, although it's not a massive amount. We see about 2.25% average annual inflation. And if we're dealing in an economy that is inflating about 1 to 2% a year, then it's really almost going in lockstep with the rest of the economy. So it's fairly flat in that regard. And if we take a look at our predicted 2019 costs, we see a fairly stable cost line across the 7-week time period. Doesn't get too far above $17.50 and doesn't get below $16.50. So it plays within that $1 range for the whole time period. And if we're talking specifically about the Christmas buy week, we're sawing it right in half, right in the middle at about $17.05 FOB for a 9-kilogram kiwi. So the last alert we're going to look at is the big day itself. We're looking at December 23rd. And if you remember at the beginning, I had said that no matter how many times I lived through this, that big day always surprised me. Well, that big day is December 23rd. Normally, we would come into the office and see, sales that really wasn't too significant for December 20th. December 21st, things would start to pick up. December 22nd, still not so significant. And then 23rd, we would get slammed. And it's hard to prepare for that one really big day. And so we're going to talk about a few of the things that we can do to make sure we're ready for that big day. First and foremost, the most important thing you can do is just know your volumes. And so the best way to know your volumes is to keep notes and consult with them the following year. Like I said, you're going to be surprised, or at least I was surprised at how big the volumes are for this one big day. But if you have something that tells you, wow, I was surprised last year, then you'll tend to believe it a little bit more, and you'll tend to be a little bit more prepared. So it's going to be a very busy day, and so you'll want to be sure that you have scheduled your labor accordingly. So that means probably a few more bodies to manage all the different tasks throughout the day. But a word of caution, there's going to be a lot of customers in the store. So you want to make sure that your staff is not getting in the way of your customers. So that might mean bringing them in a little bit earlier in order to do a little bit more prep work in preparation for the big day. The other thing that's a little bit different about December 23rd is a lot of times customers are looking to get in and get out. Sometimes they may have even taken the day off work so that they can get to the store in good time so that they can beat the rush. And so on a regular day, your processes might call for you to be in a full open position, maybe an hour or 2 hours after the store opens. It's important for this day to be ready to go the moment the store opens. So that, again, might mean bringing staff a little bit earlier, and it might mean doing a little bit more preparatory work so that you can be prepared for that opening moment. You're going to be ordering a lot of product throughout the week to satisfy the demand. So it's not a bad idea to get a jump start on some of the ordering by bringing in your heartier goods a little bit early. These are products like potatoes, carrots, onions, or the whole hard good category, things like salad dressings, croutons. You might want to take a little bit of pressure off the heavy fresh items because you're going to have a big order coming in for that. So the more you can get in a little bit earlier without impacting the quality is only going to help you down the road. And then build your displays throughout the week. You don't want to have a big display before the big rush, but it's not a bad idea to maybe put in an extra layer, a day early so that you can start to build towards that big day. And of course, you're going to want to bring your fresh products in a just-in-time scenario. So if you've got an early enough order, earlier before the opening of the store, you might be able to bring it in on the 23rd. But if you don't, you're going to have to bring it in on the 22nd. You're going to want to have all your product available to display to your customers on store opening. So if your delivery comes after store opening, you won't be prepared. But it's important to bring it in just in time to ensure as fresh as possible for this big day. And then, of course, you're going to want to be building big displays. And so this is a good time to introduce waterfall displays and perhaps another layer or two on your displays. And for a couple of reasons. For one, you're going to sell the product, so you want to have it available for your customers. But two, there are going to be a lot of customers on the floor, and you don't want to be getting in their way with stocking carts and boxes of product. And so you're going to want to have the product available for them, and as much as possible staying out of their way so that they can do their shop. And I think those are a few tips on how you can really capitalize on this big day, so that you can capitalize on this big final week of the year, so that you can finally make your financial targets for the end of the year. So that's what I have for you today. I want to thank you very much for joining us on this webinar. And of course, have a Merry Christmas and best of luck as you're managing your produce sales over the Christmas holiday timeframe. Thank you.